So many times it happened to me that I would just wake up in a sea of pain and a pool of blood, ruining, my bed sheets and, my pajamas. Western medicine failed to provide the answers and the solutions that I was happy with. I just kept searching. I went to the jungle and it was really, really hard, I'm not gonna lie. It was nothing that I expected. When I came out of the dieta, the physical pain that I was dealing with reduced about, I would say, like 70%, which was like an incredible improvement. And it was something that I couldn't reach with any other tools, previously that I tried. As I was going through this healing and clearing process, those symptoms went away. And then eventually, the pain 100% left my body, like just vanished. I experienced like an amazing recovery, not just from chronic pain, but the anxiety, the panic attacks completely left my body. There is no magic pill. The ayahuasca is not a magic pill. You cannot bypass the inner work that you need to go through in order to heal. Biggest lessons that I learned through the medicine, that most of the trauma, the illness, the disease that we experience is the result of disconnection from that love, that true self that we already are. In my case, I used to hate myself, and that was the reason I was so self-destructive, because I didn't have any self-love, any self-worth. I was very insecure, and yeah, I just wasn't happy with myself. Many people ask me about my journey with the plant medicine, the sacred ayahuasca, and what brought me, to this plant. And I also share this story with my clients as a form of inspiration, and to, show them what is possible when you are willing to do the inner work. So today this is gonna be like a unregular podcast, and it's gonna be a quite personal and vulnerable share. And I hope that it will inspire you and your journey, and you will take away whatever you need to hear in this moment. So let's dive in. I think at the beginning, my path was definitely like the wounded healer. And this story, I'm sure many of you can relate, that my own suffering and the pain I was dealing with my life put me on this path of healing and self-discovery, and eventually, put me on a path of becoming a therapist and a healer myself, and to help others on the same path. And that's also quite common culmination of your journey, I think. It really started when I was born, but let's start from a little bit later. When I was 12 years old and I had my first moon cycle, my first menstrual cycle, I was really introduced into a world of pain. And when I say pain, I understand that many women have pain with their cycles, and it's not something that is uncommon. But in my case, that pain was so deep and so excruciating that I would just throw up from the pain and pass out. So of course, like my well-meaning and caring parents took me to the doctor straight away. And it started kind of like a long process of searching for answers through Western medicine first. And I spent quite a lot of times in different doctors' offices, a little period of time in hospital. I went through just many different tests and examinations. And in the end, the doctors concluded that they have no idea why I'm in so much physical pain, because they couldn't find anything wrong with my physical body, with my hormones. Like, everything was kind of in order, nothing was really out of the ordinary. So their solution was to put me on contraceptive pills when I was 14 years old, and very strong, like opiate-based painkillers that I had to take, the first day of my cycle, because that was kind of when the majority of the pain would hit me. And for many, many years, I was, well, not so many years with the contraceptive pills, because what happened a couple of years later, it turned my mother got a deep vein thrombosis, and they run some tests on her, and it turned out that she has some kind of condition. I can't even remember what it was, but it can be inherited. So they tested me and my sister, and it turned out that we have the same condition. And if you have this particular condition and you are taking contraceptive pills, it increases the risk like 3 times, to get a deep vein thrombosis. So I had to come off the contraceptive pills, which I'm grateful for. Another problem I had with the cycle, that I totally had like a totally irregular cycle. And I would never know, when my next cycle would come. At the beginning, usually I got my cycle at night when I was sleeping. So many times it happened to me that I would just wake up in a sea of pain and a pool of blood, ruining, my bed sheets and, my pajamas. I came off the contraceptive pills, but I was still on these like very, very strong painkillers that even with the pills, like I couldn't get out of the bed. And then the pills totally knocked me out, and I was just like sleeping all day. So the result of this was that I would miss school once a month, obviously. And later, when I was older, I would miss work, on the first day of my cycle. But more than those, like more than the physical discomfort and the pain, I was just like really plagued with the question, why is this happening to me? And it has to be some kind of explanation or some kind of answer, for me to explain why I'm in so much pain. So I grew up in Hungary. I was born in Hungary in 78, when Hungary was still part of communist Russia. I was 11 years old at 89 when the regime changed and Hungary became a democratic republic. Well, that's questionable, but at least on paper. Um, and why is this important? Because, during the communism, we had full censorship, and that means that we didn't have access to a lot of information, including spiritual or esoteric kind of information at all. And that changed, with the regime change, and suddenly the borders opened, and we had a lot of information, books, magazines, TV channels, and all that kind of things that was new to me, new to us. So at that point, I started to develop an interest in esoteric and spiritual things, as, Western medicine failed to provide the answers and the solutions that I was happy with. I just kept searching. So in my teenage years, like late teens and early 20s, I just tried a lot of alternative healing to find the answers and to find some kind of remedy to this incredible pain that I was dealing with. And I tried everything that was available during that time, from crystal healing to aura soma to magnet therapy, Bach flower essences, movement medicine, a type of inner journey developed by Brandon Bays. I mean, just everything that I could put my hands on. I tried, I trained in so many different modalities myself. And eventually, I went to study educational psychology and became a therapist myself. But after the university, I decided to go more into alternative healing. And the reason for that was because during the university, I worked as a social worker for a foundation of drug prevention. And we had the first harm reduction program and needle exchange program in Hungary. And I was dealing a lot with heroin addicted people, especially junkies who lived on the street. And while I was in university, I realized that, all the knowledge, that all the tools that I got from there were very, very ineffective with the people that I was dealing with on an everyday basis and the people who I thought most needed the help and support. And that was, like apart from my own personal search, that was like another reason why I went into alternative therapies and I trained as a body worker. I trained in yoga therapy. I trained in movement medicine based on Gabriela Roth and the five rhythms. And like many, many other things, I cannot even remember all the trainings and retreats and everything that I participated. And some of these tools, provided some kind of answers, but nothing really satisfying. And sometimes they worked for a while, whatever I did, or brought me temporary relief. But in the end, I always kind of relapsed back and I was back to square one where I started, back with the debilitating pain and left without any answers. I want to share with you that apart from the physical pain that I was dealing with, I also had really, really bad anxiety and panic attacks and nightmares and night terrors. And I had a very difficult relationship with men that started with my relationship with my own father. And then later, it showed up in my romantic relationships. And maybe this will be a topic for another episode, but I'm sure you're familiar, with the story of repeating, the same script with different people. And that's what's happening in my life, that I just kept repeating the same mistakes and choosing, the same type of people. And even though at that time I moved away from Hungary, I was living in Ireland at that time, but the patterns, came with me. And that's a good lesson, by the way, that you cannot escape, your inner reality no matter where you go. When I was living in Ireland, I had the opportunity to travel more because simply I could afford it, which was very difficult to do from Hungary. My first introduction to shamanism was actually in New Zealand with a Maori shaman, and I was trained in a special form of body work that was taught by this shaman. And I had the big honor and privilege to go to New Zealand for a couple of weeks and live with his tribe, in a Maori community and study there this special type of healing modality. And really, that was my first introduction into indigenous people and shamanic practices. And that was something that really made me think that what happened to people before Western medicine, right? Because Western medicine is really the newest form of medicine. It's like less than 400 years old. And we have traditions on the earth that go way back, starting from traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda that comes from India that have thousands of years of practice, behind them. But when I realized, that the oldest form of healing is shamanic medicine and shamanic healing that is more than 100,000 years old. And since there are humans living on the earth, we had shamanism. And this is something that was prevalent from all over the earth. And it was fascinating for me that even though I'm sure you are aware of the incredible pushback and cleansing of indigenous people and wisdom in literally every country and every continent, they also didn't have written form of knowledge passed down. So it was an oral culture where the elders and the older generation was really transmitting, the wisdom and the knowledge and the tools through, teaching the younger generation and through apprenticeship. And we don't even have any written evidence, from that period of time. So it was like fascinating for me to realize that something that is that old and could survive for such a long time, even though there are some forces that really try to wipe out, the population and the wisdom that they had. I was really impressed, I have to say, and I just wanted to know more about it. So sometime later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, I was part of an online group. It doesn't matter what it was, but we had an opportunity to sign up for kind of like shamanic initiation in Peru and go to Peru and work with a sacred plant called the Mother Ayahuasca. That was in 2012, and I just had this very, very deep calling to go to the jungle and to sign up for this experience. And they selected people. They only had 13 places, and you had to go through various forms, various rounds of interviews, and submit all kinds of materials. And more than 300 people applied for that trip. And I knew in my heart that I'm gonna be one of the person who they gonna choose. And this is what happened. They invited me to go to this trip. And at that time, I did know really nothing about the Mother Ayahuasca. I only knew that it's a psychoactive plant, that in the West they categorize as a psychedelic drug, which is, in retrospect, it seems quite ridiculous to me. But that was it. And we did have internet at that time, but yeah, I really didn't feel like doing any research. And at that time, it wasn't a lot of information, to be honest, on the internet or on social media. So I went to this trip really without knowing anything about this plant or the traditions, surrounding it, because I had such a deep calling and I felt in my heart that I just need to do this for some reason. So much so that I decided that after living 6 years in Ireland, I will leave the country and I will move to a different place. But I didn't know where I want to go. And I was hoping, that the medicine will enlighten me. So I gave up my whole life in Ireland and sold everything. And I just felt that this trip will change my life and the direction of my life. So I just left and I didn't have really any plans afterwards. So I went to Peru to do my first dieta deep in the Amazonas jungle, basically 8 hours ride with a motorboat from Iquitos, which was the closest town. So when I say in the jungle, with no electricity, no running water, no plumbing, nothing, is like, a tribe who lived in the jungle in really back to nature. When I decided to go there, my friends were like, they couldn't believe that I signed up for something like this, because everybody thought that I'm such a princess and I grew up in a city in an apartment. I was quite, detached from nature. I had an extreme phobia from spiders. I had to go actually to hypnotherapy before my trip because I had such an extreme fear of spiders that I thought that if I'm going to see a spider, in the jungle, I'm really going to freak out. So I went to get a couple of sessions, and we were able to deal with that fear and that phobia, and I don't have that anymore. So I went to the jungle, and I was there for 2 weeks on the dieta with this Shipibo shaman who was coming from the Shipibo lineage and his family. And it was really, really hard, I'm not gonna lie. It was nothing that I expected. Now, in retrospect, I realized that I didn't have any proper preparation apart from the physical diet that you have to do. Is there is a very restricted diet of what you can eat, and you cannot eat before you go into an ayahuasca ceremony. But I knew nothing about setting intentions and preparing myself mentally. I had all these like ideas in my head that, oh, I'm going to be enlightened and I'm going to get finally all the answers that I'm looking for. I'm going to have clarity for my future and a clear direction to continue with my life. And basically none of that happened. We had 5 ceremonies in a row. The first 3 ceremony was extremely taxing, extremely hard, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like on every level. So much so that after like the third ceremony, I had like a huge meltdown and I was just crying all the time. I was extremely confused. I didn't want to continue with the dieta. I didn't want to drink any more medicine. I wanted to go home. I doubted, my decision to go into the jungle the first place. Thank God, I had another man in my group who did the dieta before, and he was a great support for me, and he helped me through basically through that crisis that I was going through, and kind of convinced me to stay and to go through with my process, which I did. And it is true that in the end I did get some kind of breakthrough. And during that first dieta, the information about, the pain I was dealing with was that it's like ancestral, that I got the information that you can inherit ancestral trauma the same way you inherit DNA. And for some reason, in my lineage there, well, I'm sure it's not only my lineage, many women can relate to that. In the time of patriarchy, women suffered a lot and were oppressed and extremely abused, and somehow I was carrying that pain of that abuse, and every month I would bleed. Basically, the memory of that pain that was accumulated on my lineage would activate and manifest in my body as physical pain. And at that time, this was really the first explanation that made any sense to me. And when I came out of the dieta, the physical pain that I was dealing with reduced about, I would say, like 70%, which was like an incredible improvement. And it was something that I couldn't reach with any other tools, previously that I tried. However, the years and the months that followed, even though like I was able mostly to come off the painkillers that I was taking, and I would have a couple of months when I didn't have that much pain. The pain that I was having was more like normal and manageable, and I could just rest and kind of breathe through it. I didn't have to take the pills. But every now and then, the pain would kind of return with a vengeance, and it would be as bad as it was, at the beginning. So I was extremely confused, and I didn't understand if this is like ancestral pain, then how is it possible if I work through that pain in the ceremony and it's gone most of the time, but then sometimes it's returned. I was confused about that, what is really happening. But I was devoted to continue working with this medicine because, as I mentioned earlier, this was something that helped me the most, from all the things that I tried for many, many years. I left Peru, and of course, I didn't get enlightened. I didn't get the clarity I was hoping for. I went through like a period of extreme confusion. I didn't know what to do with my life, even where to live, where to go. So I was traveling for a while, for almost a year. And during this time, I kept drinking medicine, which I don't recommend you to do because I thought naively, first of all, that the more is better. And also that I didn't get, the healing and the clarity that I was looking for. So obviously I didn't drink enough medicine and I have to drink more. At that time, I didn't know nothing about the integration process. I had no idea, that the bigger part of the process is after the ceremony and it plays out in your life, in 24/7, but more about this, in another episode. So I kept drinking medicine. I had a couple of more ceremonies. And eventually I got an opportunity to come to Mexico, and I decided that I'm going to move to Mexico, which is a pretty brave move because I never been to Mexico before. And at that time, I didn't speak any Spanish. I only spoke English. So I moved to Mexico, and this friend of mine who was living here and who was basically inviting me took me to another ayahuasca ceremony. So that was like within a year, I had, I don't know how many ceremonies, but a lot, more than you should have and more than you need, definitely. And after the ceremony, I just had like a spiritual emergency, like a complete, like a dissolution of identity. And it was very, very scary. I thought that I'm gonna lose my mind. I thought that I'm gonna end up in a mental institution. And yeah, I was in a state of shock, for days. Like I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop crying. Thankfully, I met like a Mexican healer who had training in Western psychology and in breath work. That was something I was already trained in. And she also worked with the medicine, and she came to my aid and helped me through that crisis. And she told me to stop drinking medicine and start to do my integration process. And I was like, what the heck is that? What is the integration? What are you talking about? And then she explained to me that when you work with this powerful sacred plant, basically it catalyzes a death and rebirth process that you are going through, and that, takes several months and it plays out in your life. And that's when you have to do the majority of the inner work to get the results that you want, and to not to fall back into your old patterns and habits. This was something familiar for me from rebirthing, and I was already familiar with a map that Dr. Stanislav Grof described as the basic perinatal matrices that basically describes, this death and rebirth process. So once, I was made aware what is happening and what kind of framework I can use to navigate that process, I immediately obviously stopped drinking medicine for almost 2 years, and I focused on this integration. And it's really, really helped me to come back to myself, to come back to my center. And really, I did lose my mind, but in a good way, not in a way that I was afraid of, ending up in a loony bin. But what I was losing, obviously, the old identity and the attachment and the identification with my identity as who I am. So I'm not going to go into that like much deeper, but coming back to the pain and to the severe anxiety that I was dealing with. For the anxiety, by the way, I self-medicated with marijuana for many, many years, which I'm grateful for, because I think if I wouldn't have found that plan, probably I would have been medicated into oblivion with Western medicine. But obviously, I developed a dependency with that plant that I wanted to also let go and break. So I kept working, after that integration, I kept working with the medicine, but in a different way, and very respectfully, and leaving plenty of time between ceremonies and doing my own inner work, doing the integration. During all this time, I was practicing as a therapist. That's what I did in my whole life, with different tools, with different modalities. The medicine had such an impact on my life that I decided to pivot my career into psychedelic therapy. And the people just came to me because I was talking about the integration process all the time, and people find me and were saying to me, oh, I want to do that integration with you that you are talking about. Just to clarify things, I'm not a shaman. I don't serve medicine. I'm not trained in that. I'm a therapist, so what I do today in my work is to prepare people for a ceremony and then to help them to integrate their experiences, right? Long story short, because I was trained in so many modalities, I was trained in trauma care, trauma-informed care. I was aware that I have a lot of symptoms of sexual trauma, but I assumed at that time that it's like something ancestral, because nothing happened to me personally, in this lifetime, at least nothing I could recall. And as I kept working with the medicine, I was off the pain medication for the most time, but as I mentioned, every now and then I would have like a really bad month and I would be back to square one and I would have to take pills and I was completely debilitated, by the pain. So I just kept doing my inner work and go deeper with the medicine to find more answers and to be able to overcome, this chronic pain that I was dealing with most of my life. And many years later, so just want to point out that this didn't happen, from one day to another. um, Shortly after, a ceremony, I had memories return to me about childhood sexual abuse that I went through between the age of 7 to 12 that was like suppressed into amnesia. Actually, it's quite common, this type of dissociative amnesia, especially with the childhood sexual abuse. And it's like a kind of like a protection mechanism of the psyche to keep you alive, because when you're a child, this is something that you can't deal with, you can't process. So what happened to me that between ceremonies, I started to get flashbacks of what happened. And then slowly I started to piece together, the puzzle. And it was super difficult time of my life. A little bit still makes me emotional, but when something like this happens, when the original event went down, or events, because this continued for a period of time in my childhood, you completely dissociate and split, and push these memories somewhere far, far away into your subconscious. And that means that you do not process them, you do not feel them because it is something that is too much to bear at the time. So when I recovered, the memories, it was a very strange experience from the perspective that I knew that this happened like a long time ago, but also I felt that it's happening to me now because all the emotions, all the physical, part of it and everything, I was feeling it for the first time. So it was quite bizarre and also quite dramatic, when it went down. The first couple of weeks was extremely difficult, emotionally speaking, even mentally. I was still in doubt, I couldn't believe that this is something that I personally went through and I couldn't remember. And not that just I couldn't remember, but that also that I went through many, many years of therapy, so much healing work, even working with the sacred plant for a couple of years, and I just couldn't believe that it takes so much work, to basically ask away those memories. At that time, I went and did a bunch of family constellations, which I really recommend, that you combine with your integration process anyways, because it's really, really good way to receive information, quite clear information about things that happened in the past. And through that process and through going to a therapist who specialized on sexual ritual abuse, we managed to kind of figure out that one of the reasons I didn't remember was not just, a natural protection mechanism of the psyche, but also because I was not conscious when the abuse happened. So I was drugged with some kind of substance, and when you are not conscious, the memories are not stored in your frontal lobe. That means that you don't have visual memory, when you have visual memory, when you go on holiday and then you can recall, the images, almost like seeing a movie in your mind's eye. You don't have that when you are not aware of what's happening because you are not conscious, but the memories are stored more in the limbic part of your brain and in the reptilian part of the brain, which is extremely like more like somatic memories and emotional memories. And then you can get some flashback of some pictures, but mostly what you get is like the feelings, the how you felt, during that time, and bodily sensations, and when I was going through this, I had, extreme pain in my body, in my uterus, obviously, like I was passing blood, outside of my cycle. And obviously, like the emotional part of it was really, really intense, realizing that what really happened. And I'm not gonna go super deep into it because I didn't disclose to this, to my whole family for reasons I don't have to explain right now. But the point of it is that this person who was abusing me was let into our family and accepted as a close friend, so there was this real like element of betrayal and a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of story. And also, apart from the substance that he used, he installed some kind of hypnotic, like mind control, that basically the result of that was that every time I was trying to access the core wound, my mind would put up more and more walls around it and more protection. And I believe that without, the sacred plant, without the Mother Ayahuasca, I would have never recovered these memories. And the problem with that is that you can't heal what you are not aware of. And in my whole life, I was feeling that something is wrong with me. I had extremely self-destructive behavior when I was younger, when I was in my 20s. I had several addictions that I went through, and it was kind of unexplainable. People were like, wow, you had a good life. Like, what's wrong with you? So that was like mirrored back to me, but that was my feeling. I kind of somehow felt that I have like some invisible, like scarlet letter, like put on me or something. And that was the feeling that put me on the healing path. That's why I became a therapist myself, because I just knew somehow in the bottom of my heart and my soul that there is something that I need to excavate, from myself, that I need to discover, that I need to deal with. And when this thing came up, even though it was a very difficult experience, going through this kind of remembering, I also was really grateful for this happening, because I felt that finally I managed to get to the root of the problem. And now that I am aware, I am able to heal it, because I believe that everything can be healed, that you can recover from the worst kind of things that can happen to you. And I always believe that, so I was grateful, that finally I have those answers that I was looking for. And now I was standing kind of in the door of freedom, and I knew that this is a liberating experience for me, because before I just felt that I'm like just circling around something invisible, something that I cannot touch, something that I cannot like put into words, but I was feeling that something is there. And then finally, it came out. I have to tell you that before actually I recovered my memories, like my whole body broke out in eczema, and I never had any problem in my skin, like on my skin, with my skin in my whole life. This is also extremely unusual that you get eczema, when you are 40, because this is when this happened. So obviously at that time I didn't know why I have the eczema, and the eczema that I had is started around my genitals. and then spread all over my face and then my arms and legs, and it was really, really bad. Like I would like scratch my skin until it was bleeding. I couldn't sleep, it was very, very taxing. And if you know me, then you must know that for me to go to a Western medicine doctor, it's a lot, for me. But at that time, I was so miserable that I went to a doctor to see, what they can do for me. And again, I ended up at the same place like at the beginning. They were like, okay, we have no idea why you have this like suddenly breaking out on your skin, and we cannot cure it. This is something that you need to learn to live with, and the only thing we can do for you is to give us a cream with steroids that I refuse to take. So thank God. At that time, my friend referred me to a homeopath, and I went to a homeopath, and he gave me a remedy like after a long consultation, and and I was on that remedy for a year and a half while I was, also processing this experience, and it completely cleared up my skin. I don't have eczema anymore. And, when I'm extremely stressed, I have some irritation coming out on my skin, but it's nothing like it was before. And my system can manage it and can kind of, bring it back to balance. So I don't have those symptoms anymore. But long story short, so first I had this eczema, and then a couple of weeks later, the eczema started. I was starting to recover the memories, and then it was clear to me that this was very much connected, and the skin is basically a boundary between your inner being and the outside world. Also, I find it very interesting that the eczema started, like around my genitals and then on my face, around my mouth, more particularly. I had flashbacks of, when the memories came back of this person, like covering my mouth with his hand and things like that. So literally things were erupting from me through my skin, like as the memories were coming up, it just manifested in my physical body as eczema. I have to tell you that that first year, when I was dealing with the eczema and I was on the remedy and I was processing, the memories and the whole experience, and like my whole world was kind of turned upside down. The very same year, I also had scabies and lice, so everything that you can get going bad with your skin, I had it. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, how many more, things I can take? So yeah, it was kind of a rough journey, but the first few months of after recovering my memories, I had, excruciating, painful moon cycles again. That was kind of challenging, but as I was going through this healing and clearing process, those symptoms went away, and then eventually, the pain 100% left my body, like just vanished. This was like a good couple of years ago that I went through this experience. I still have my cycle and I have zero pain. I have like no discomfort at all. I didn't take any pills. I didn't go to any Western medicine. I didn't get any interventions at all. And this is simply was trauma related. The pain I was experiencing, trauma related, obviously my own personal trauma in these lifetimes, and also, trauma that was coming down on my female lineage, and the accumulation of those things manifested as physical pain in my body. And I believed in this like even before, but now that I had the personal experience and The only thing I did was, emotional, mental, spiritual healing work and working with the sacred plant with the ayahuasca. I kept working with the ayahuasca of clearing my physical body, my emotional, mental body, energetic bodies, clearing, on a soul level. And I had some very intense ceremonies, and purgings and clearings that went down. I had the pain, coming up in the ceremony. So I always say, like, feeling is healing. And when you are letting go of something that was suppressed, that you are experiencing it, and that's part of the healing process. And this is not something bad that happens, but I'm extremely grateful, to have gone through this experience because, well, for numerous reasons, like because I learned that you can heal everything, you can find the root of the problem if you are committed to your own journey, if you are willing to go where you need to go in order to heal, in order to find those answers, you will. In my case, I was called to the Mother Ayahuasca, but I don't think that's everybody's path. And even if you never drink plant medicine, I believe this is still possible, but it might take way longer for you because this is a plant that basically expands awareness and makes the unconscious conscious. And all these traumas and all these answers are suppressed into the unconscious and behind seven locked doors and all this, and naturally part of your being do not want to go there. You naturally want to move away from pain and go towards pleasure. This is something instinctual, so it requires, I think, courage and willingness and openness and commitment, to do this work. But if you have that, then you can, for sure get the results that you are looking for. In my case, it took me years, to work through all of this. And this is what it took. And I'm not questioning that. I think that probably if my memories would have come back earlier, it would have probably re-traumatized me. And but this time when it happened, I was prepared. I did a lot of internal work already, which I think allowed me to go to that depth. And obviously with the help of the medicine, I was able to open these doors that were, seriously shut before me for many, many years. I experienced like an amazing recovery, not just from chronic pain, but the anxiety, the panic attacks completely left my body. I never took any medication for that. All the addictions fell away, all the smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, numbing myself, in different shapes and forms, promiscuity, like a lot of things that were present in my life for a longer period of time. They naturally fell away. It wasn't something that I was consciously working on, to heal from addiction, to heal from the anxiety. When I dealt with the root problem, which was, the sexual trauma, and I was able to process that and let that go, all the rest of it that was connected, to the same roots, just simply like left, and I don't have those present in my life anymore. And this is something, I always say to my clients, that there is a root of the problem. And that's why I'm devoted to work with this sacred plant, the Mother Ayahuasca, 13 years now. And that's why I pivoted my therapy practice into psychedelic assisted therapy. And I helped so many people to recover from any kinds of diseases, basically depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic illness, chronic pain, by going to the root of the problem. I work with other sacred plants as well, and not to compare or to diminish, the value of other sacred plants. But for me, the Mother Ayahuasca is really the one of the most amazing tool that allows you to go to the root of the problem, that allows you to go into the depth of your unconscious and into that inner shadow, into that inner darkness that you don't really want to go and why you would want to go, right? And kind of it speeds up the process, I feel, but also your process is more intense. So there is like shorter time, but it's greater intensity. And that's why I created my program, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy, that is a 15 months long program to give people the support and the container and the safety for the whole journey. Because based on my experience, it take about a year and a half to go through a full cycle of death and rebirth. And the reason for that is because you're going, one step at a time, because if everything would be unleashed and cleared out of your system overnight, you couldn't bear it. Your physical body would not be able to process it, and you would lose your mind. You would probably go crazy. It's just so you have this natural built-in intelligence, to give you always as much as you can bear, as you can face, as you can process. And we carry a lot. As I said, it's not just your personal experience from this lifetime, but your lineage, your family, and then of course we are all connected. We are one big family. So there is the collective aspect as well. So there is just a lot to work on, and it takes time. There is no magic pill. The ayahuasca is not a magic pill. You cannot bypass the inner work that you need to go through in order to heal and to awaken and to remember. Nobody can do this for you. The medicine certainly will not do it for you. The medicine will open the doors and show you and help you to see what is the real problem, and then you need to address that, and you need to address it in your everyday life. If you realize that you are in a toxic relationship, the medicine is not going to take away that person from your life. You are the one who need to set healthy boundaries. You are the one who need to learn to say no, and you are the one who need to make the necessary steps and actually, you know, change your behavior, change your mindset in your everyday life. So I always say to my clients that you are the healer. And the real medicine is love. Love is the medicine. That's my motto. You are the healer and love is the medicine. And the reason for that, because I really, any self-destructive behavior comes from the lack of self-love. Basically, what I learned, biggest lessons that I learned through the medicine, that most of the trauma, the illness, the disease that we experience is the result of disconnection from that love, that true self that we already are, the place where we're coming from. We are made of that love. And in my case, I used to hate myself, and that was the reason I was so self-destructive, because I didn't have any self-love, any self-worth. I was very insecure. And yeah, I just wasn't happy with myself. And I always say to my clients that healing is an act of self-love, because when you set out on the healing path, you basically say that I do care about myself. I do love myself so much that I'm willing to do this work in order to be free, in order to experience greater joy and happiness in my life, in this life. And that's basically the biggest medicine is self-love. And through my journey with the medicine, I learned to accept my all parts of myself, accept and embrace all parts of myself, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly, and to realize that I'm more than my human identity. I'm more than this physical body, and my essence and my true self is made of that beautiful, shining, unconditional love that cannot be hurt, that cannot be broken or traumatized. And I think, when you go through really difficult experiences, it becomes your story and you identify that. And I really don't resonate with this anymore when people identify as a sexual abuse survivor and this kind of stuff, because it just enforces, the sick identity. It just enforces, even in the 12-step programs, which I have a lot of respect for, but, that particular part when they say I am an addict, even though they don't have the addictive behavior anymore, many, many years, that is something that is reinforcing a story, an identity that is basically saying that there is something wrong with you. And what I learned from my journey is that there was nothing wrong with me, and the behaviors that I had was a response to something horrible that happened. And it was not my fault, basically. And you know what they say, that your wound is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility, because nobody can heal you. Only you can do this for yourself. Nobody can feel your suppressed emotion. Only you can do that. Nobody can change your perspective and your behavior. Only you can do that. But the best that you can do is to get as much help as possible, because this is not an easy process. And even up until today, even though I'm a very, very efficient therapist, and I have incredible results with people who suffered, for many years, or suffered through a whole lifetime and tried everything they could think of and nothing helped them. And they came to my program and they had like 100% full recovery, within 15 months. So even though I have this gift, and I have the to share with others, and I have so many people to heal themselves and to remember their true nature and to experience a type of love that comes from the inside of you, that doesn't depend on others, and that is unconditional, and that is always present. When I'm going through like intensity, I go to another therapist. I go and ask for help, because even though, I'm trained, and I have plenty of experience, but when it's about you, you just cannot look at yourself, from the outside, and you are so involved in your own story. And it's just difficult, to do it. And you can do this trial and error, but it will take you so much more time, and it will involve so much more unnecessary suffering that, why would you do that? And by the way, when you are isolating and you are not asking for help, that's a trauma response that I had, at the beginning. And I felt that nobody cares about me and I have to do everything alone. But this is not true, because help is always available and it's always around you. But if you cannot reach out and ask for help, if you cannot receive help, then then you are alone. But you choose to be alone. You are never alone. We are all connected. And you learn to isolate yourself, because maybe when you were a child you asked for help and nobody was there, or you were rejected many, many times, and then you learned that, okay, it's no point reaching out anymore. So, and that's based in trauma. That's not a natural behavior, because if you look at children and they are in distress, the first thing they do is they cry out for help, and they say, mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, help me, come here. Right. And that's a natural behavior, and we are here for each other. So yeah, this is kind of my story in a nutshell. If you want to learn a little bit in more detail, you can read some more details in my book, Heart Medicine, Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy, and the Integration Process. And I'm gonna keep sharing more about, my own personal journey in the coming months, in the podcast, because I feel it's important to share it with people and to know that I don't think, I'm better than you, or I'm some kind of superior being. And one of the gifts, of my journey is that I am able to effectively help others, and I'm able to relate to other people's pain and suffering, because this is something that I personally experienced, but I also experienced full healing and recovery. And I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that that is possible. And if you want it, and if you're willing to do the work, you can have the same results. And if you need help or support with that, please reach out for a free consultation at avatarhealingarts.com, which is my website. If you like this episode, please comment and subscribe to my channel. And I would love to hear about your story. If you have questions to me, you can just leave a comment, and then maybe I'll do another episode about, just answering the questions that came up, because I'm sure that it brings up a lot. Yeah, another thing I want to share before we wrap it up, that I'm not angry, of the person who abused me. I'm actually, turn this into a gift, and I feel that it helped me to recover my strength, my power, my worth, the love that I have within me. That's like kind of like a saying that if something doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. But I don't believe it's necessarily true, but it was true in my case. And I believe very, very deeply that you can turn any challenges into gifts, because we live in this duality, in this universe where there is like the contrast, and, we move between the opposites. And every coin has two sides, right? So the most horrible things have the seeds of the biggest gifts inside of it. And whatever I went through enabled me to find, things that I was always looking for within myself, and also to be able to serve other people, and help their journey, as I was helped by many people on my path, because I didn't do this alone. And I still continue on this path, and I'm not perfect, and I haven't finished yet, and there is so many layers and so many things to deal with. And of course, I have challenges from time to time. I just went through another dark night of the soul recently. More about that in another podcast episode. Um, but the good news is that I'm still here, and I feel that whatever happened to me, it couldn't break me in the end. And I always say to my clients that the best revenge is happiness, is to find your peace, your happiness, your power. And that's the best revenge, and don't hold on to anger and resentment, because this is something that will poison you from the inside. And the best that you can do is to forgive. But in order to forgive, you just have to go through your own process, because you cannot forgive when you are angry. And it took me a while, to process that anger and that rage that came up, in my own journey, when I was dealing with recovering with my memories. And it took me a while to come to this place of forgiveness, that I can truly say that I forgive you. And but you have no power over me or my life. And I refuse to identify anymore with the wounded healer, with somebody who is broken or survived, trauma or abuse, because I know that I am bigger than that, and I'm more than that. I'm more than my story. I am more than my identity. And there is a part of me that is within me, that cannot be touched by all these experiences, and cannot be destroyed, and cannot be. And finally, I got reconnected to that place within me, and I have access to that place at all times within me. And even though obviously life happens, and sometimes we, sidetrack a little bit, but this connection is there, and I can always come back to myself, and to my heart, and to my higher power, if you want to, call it like that. And that is something that is invaluable, because before I always looked for looked at others for the answers. I was, following different teachers and gurus and spiritual people to tell me the answers, to tell me what to do, because simply I didn't have access to the wisdom and the power that we all have inside of us. And now I do, and this is what I believe freedom is, that you don't depend on others, that you don't rely on others. I mean, physically we do, obviously, because probably I couldn't survive in the wilderness alone, and that's not the point, but the point is that if I need to make a decision, I can come inside of me and access that place of power and wisdom inside of me and make up my own mind and know what is best for me at any given moment. And I don't need to check it with 10 people and ask for their advice and search the internet to fill my mind with more information and misconceptions. But there is, a pure place for me that is not my mind, and it's infinitely wiser and stronger than my mind. And that is our heart, and the heart is the gateway to the soul and the spirit. You cannot access these planes of existence and this type of power through your mind, because your mind is full of bullshit, and your mind is polarized, and it moves between the opposites. And if you wish for something and you get it, in that moment, the desire arises to get something else. And then you get that. And again, now you want something else. So the mind will never be content. You will never find peace in your mind. And that's just the nature of the mind. That's why we need to live from the heart, and we need to follow the path of the heart, because that's where your power is coming from, and that's where you can connect to the higher wisdom within you. Yeah, so I hope you like this episode, and yeah, please leave a comment and connect with me, and sending so much love to you from my heart. We are all related, we are all one family, and just believe, that everything is possible, and you are infinitely more beautiful and powerful and wonderful that you could have ever imagined. And don't give up on yourself. Okay, so lots of love, and until next time.